All right, hello everybody. Welcome to this making of my latest image, Reminiscence. Today we're gonna talk about how this image was created, what was the goal, what were the techniques used, in creating it, and the time period and how to be efficient and how to be fast in order to survive in the freelance CG business. So you can check out the high-res version of my of the render on my ArtStation, and yeah. So first of all, the inspiration of the image came from the photograph from amazing photographer called Rebecca Bathory, and she has this unique style of photographing old, used and destroyed places and that kind of stuff, which ultimately has a lot of history, and it makes for a good story. So I chose this particular photograph as inspiration. I didn't want it to replicate it exactly because you might get into issues with rights and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to get like something similar, something that can resemble this kind of image, but with my own twist to it. And the second reason why I didn't go, look, went with making it look exactly like the references because I wanted to tackle a problem that we get oftentimes in production with clients where they tell you um, make something look like this, but in the same time not look like it. So that's a very big challenge, and I had quite a few examples of that in the last few years. So it was just so yeah, I decided to make a video on how you can produce something like it and avoid certain restrictions and avoid certain problems with rights and everything like that. So this is the final render. It was rendered in Redshift. I try to push Redshift nowadays as much as I can for production use, just because it's very well integrated in Maya and it's very, very fast, especially if you have good GPU. So it's very similar to V-Ray in the way it's structured, in the way settings are named and that kind of stuff. But it uses the power of GPU to create very very fast renders. So this is the high resolution. It's rendered in 4K. As you can see, it gets you can get pretty nice results, and the render of this was, I believe, 27 minutes or something like that, which is impressive for this kind of image on a 4K resolution, because in V-Ray this would easily take at least few hours, with all the passes and that kind of stuff. So first thing, uh, we can I'm gonna jump into Maya so I can show you the scene, how it's structured, how it's set up, why it's set up in a certain way, and yeah, we can take it from there. So this is the scene. Basically, I have a camera, a locked camera with 35 millimeter lens, which is pretty much the default in Maya, but I found that for this image it gives me nice results. And this image was created in exactly 2 days, in roughly 16 to 17 hours of work constantly. So the reason I I did it in that time frame is because I'm planning to do environment modeling workshop here in Macedonia in Skopje. So the goal was with this image was to create something that can serve as a benchmark and a quality, reference for what can be done in basically 16 hours of constant work. So, but I'm gonna, share more details about the workshop towards the end of this podcast. So, um, being fast in production, especially if you're doing still, means cheating and lots of it, because if you render or if you model everything, um, even what's outside the camera, you basically never gonna finish it, and it's gonna take you more time, and in the end, if the camera doesn't see it, then it's really not important. So I'm gonna turn on the wireframe so you can see the geometry here. So I used multiple techniques for making this as fast as possible. For example, let me turn up this layer. For example, this main piece of the door was created to work well with ZBrush and its sculpting. This was just a standard subdivision. This and this were the standard subdivision workflow, edge extrusion modeling method. Because these two pieces didn't receive any sculpting; they were just modeled and textured in Substance Painter. And yeah, so if I zoom out, you're gonna see that this is pretty much the entire scene. So this is the basic block out of the room, and you can see that I cheated big time here with the door because I modeled in details only what is visible in the camera, and the rest of the door is still there, but it's very very low res, and it's there just for reflection and for shadow casting, and except for the glass, because it's a transparent object and it didn't make sense make it all the way up, didn't need it to. So uh, yeah, this was created for subdivision method, so it can be rendered as a subdivision surface with the three key press in Maya. We all know that, as well as these rubber connectors for the window. The glass was not modeled in a way to be rendered a subdivision surface because it's a glass plane, and it didn't make any sense to do that. This chair model is extremely simple. You can basically see all the repeats inside are exactly the same, just scaled and squashed together to make it resemble a chair, because I knew from the start that this is going to be um, blurred in depth of field, so I didn't really pay attention too much. As long as the silhouette was there and it resembled like a basic chair, it didn't really matter the topology. And I mean, I did model it with a good topology and stuff, but the details were not very very important. Also these the silver and the porcelain plates and that kind of stuff, the bottles, extremely simple models. um, I have a window as well. um, um, yeah, window model with just that was there just for the shadow casting. You can see it's completely low poly, no details whatsoever. um, and yeah, so that's the basic geometry and layout. One thing that is really really important is to stay organized when you work, because oftentimes when you're a freelancer, you can get either corrections or notes from the client, or just a different version. Like 6 months later, they want same thing, but the door open completely, or like a different render. So you really should be organized, because if you open the scene 6 months later, you will not remember what you were doing and why you named certain stuff in a certain way. So the way I like to organize stuff is I have a main group that contains all the geometry and lights, which is the name of the project. And then inside I have the lights group, which is basically a redshift dome light, and like a rectangular physical light for the window. And I named them accordingly, like HDRI lighting and the fill lighting. And then I have the geo group, which contains all the geometry in the scene. Um, so yeah, and everything is named properly, like window, the door, um, the blouse that was simulated in Marvelous. So I named that as well, just because I'd like to know how I did this, and where to search for the source file if I need to, make a different version or different pose, or whatever. Yeah, so that's about it for the scene organization and structure. And so the reason I modeled it in camera, from the camera, is because I knew it is going to be a single image, and I didn't worry about too much what's outside the camera, as I mentioned. So um, this piece was created with the thought of it's gonna be brought to ZBrush, and I'm gonna do the detail sculpting there, and then I'm gonna texture everything in Painter. I started using Painter recently, like maybe half a year ago, and I find it for personal projects and for some of the freelance project, it works very, very well. Some of the studios unfortunately don't allow to use Painter yet in VFX world. We still stick to Mario for that, but it's so much faster. It produces great results, and with the 8K and UDIM support nowadays, it's just a blast. So let's jump to ZBrush to see how the door was detailed. Um, so yeah, I didn't go too crazy with making it very beaten and destroyed, because it was supposed to be old and weathered, but not like completely destroyed. So I have the metal piece for the handle here, and few scratches here and there, like broke the edges a little bit, some wood definition, grain, that kind of stuff. Just to get the overall details, because I knew that once I'm in Painter, I'm gonna have a lot more fun with detailing it, and hide the normal maps and that kind of stuff. So this is how far I took it in ZBrush, and this was the only piece of the render that was textured, actually sculpted in ZBrush. And to be honest, I could have done this in Painter as well, but I just like the workflow you get from ZBrush, and the brushes that I already have preset, that I know they always work. And when you have a deadline, and when you need to deliver something by a certain date, the safest and most logical thing to do is to do it in the fastest possible way that that always works. So that was the the thought behind that one. So yeah, and that's why you can see this piece is, you know, much more detailed in geometry than, you know, the rest of the image, because this was the only one used in sculpting. So yeah, now I'm gonna go to Substance Painter and show you how I did the shaders for this for the door. Um, you know, we're gonna do a quick breakdown for that, and then we're gonna go back in Maya and, you know, just do a breakdown of the rest of the shaders. So let's jump to Painter and you know, discuss the shader for the door. All right, so here we are in Painter. Um, this is the shader that was used for the door. So let's break it down and see, you know, what happened and how I got the look. So let's start from the very bottom. So I started with a preset wood bench veined, just as a base, you know, for the wood grain and for the, you know, the small details it has. Um, then I have a fill layer that is, you know, move this over. So I have a fill layer that controls the roughness and the color. And in the roughness section, I mapped a wood texture that I believe is either find here, or I just used some of my library, you know, and and that was just to get a different feel for the door, and you know, bring it a bit closer to the reference. And then I added small scratches that are visible in the roughness only, so you can see the color is black. And you know, I'm modulating the roughness value to get different feels, and I have a mask that controls that blend between those two materials. And then I have another fill layer, which is basically doing the same thing with just a different roughness and height value to break down the specularity of the door. And so all the layers above are doing similar stuff. I'm just modulating the color and the roughness value and the intensity of the layers to get the, you know, the layered look of the door. So the door above it is making it, you know, even dustier, and this one this one really you know, brings the roughness is, you know, point 0.8 almost. So it really, you know, pushes the you know, some of the areas of the door to be, you know, much more dull than the rest of it. And then we have, if Painter catches up, come on, hey, there you are. And we have another layer doing similar things, and then we have this layer which is you know, very light brown color that makes it, you know, like a dust stains, and you know, just breaking up the door even more. And the final layer that brings, you know, the details of the sculpt just a bit more. And this one, I believe, has a cavity. Yeah, this one is using the color to be added, in the shadow area to appear, more dusty. So as you can see, it's pretty basic. There's not much, fancy stuff going on. I didn't, spend a ton of time, tweaking it because it had to be done, in 2 days. So if it works, then you just move on. You don't spend too much time on it. You can see I have like UV stretching errors on the back, but I completely ignore that because it is not worth it, spending the time to fix it because the camera will never see that. And as you can see, I deleted the faces on the back of these pieces, just to save on UV and texture memory. Uh, so yeah, that's how Painter was used to texture this part of the door. And I'm gonna move to the door handle now and break down that shader, which is a bit more complicated than this one. And then we're gonna, go to Maya and break down the rest. Alrighty then. So here is the door handle, so the metal part. So I started with a preset called Iron Old, and I tweaked the colors and the parameters to make it match my likings and my needs for the image. And then above that, I created another material which is slightly more reflective. You can see I used the Steel Dark Stained preset, which can be found somewhere in this base of materials, and I'm modulating them with a smart mask. So just draw a mask builder and play with the settings, and you get some of the grungy feel of the iron old material and some of the reflectivity from the steel, the dark steel stained material. And then on top of that, I have this layer. Come on. Which basically have a mask that uses the slope and the ambient occlusion to drive the dusty look. So it's just a basic you know fill layer with no reflectivity at all. So roughness is at one, and I'm I'm using it, to just, if you zoom in here, you're gonna see that I'm using it to cover up some of the some of the areas that would make sense to be more dirty and that kind of stuff. So then on top of that, I have the dust that goes on top of everything, and that material is being saved as a smart material. And after that, you just select the different piece and just drag and drop it on the other part, and basically you're gonna have the same thing textured. Oh, Painter freaked out for a second. So yeah, that's pretty much how um, the metal was textured. And after I was done with with everything, you just simply go file, export, and just choose the redshift as a renderer, and it's gonna spit out all the maps for you. And if you plug them in redshift, architectural material is gonna look like 99% the same. The reason it doesn't come 100% the same is because BRDF, the material, I'm using GGX as as my BRDF, so it has just a slight change, but it's really no big deal. The only thing it's very very important is to output the maps as EXR, 32-bit EXR. If you don't do that, you're gonna have to color correct, gamma correct your images, and that is really not something you would like to do, because it's just uh, you're gonna spend time attaching gamma correction nodes and that kind of stuff, and and it's really not worth it. The XR files are a little bit bigger, and they take up a bit more memory when you load them in, but since this scene was pretty small, I didn't really cared about that much, about that. So let's jump in Maya and see how the rest of the shaders were set up. All right, so back in Maya, let's check out the door material first, the wood that we just looked in Painter. So here is the main material that is making the door look. As I said, it's just a standard architectural Redshift architectural material, and with all the maps just piped in into the according slots, and you just get the same look like in Painter. So I really don't see the point of explaining where you should plug in the diffuse, because you have color and reflectivity, glossiness, and so on and so forth. And then I have a dust material, which is basically a layered material that goes on top of this one to simulate the dusty, dirty look. The one that I got from Painter was not enough for me in the final render. So if you remember, I had like a dust layer on top, but I decided to add a procedural dust in Maya just to bring the old look a bit more. So what I have here is just a standard material with no reflectivity, and I have just an image texture, just a concrete texture that I corrected it with the color balance, and the color gain was set to this light yellow brown color, and the roughness of the diffuse is set to 1. So that one goes into the blend material blender, into the layer 1 color, and the base is the original, oops, the original door wood, and I'm blending them using Maya Snow texture. For those of you that didn't know, Maya Snow is actually a slope-based procedural that you can use to get this kind of effect where stuff that are on top will have one shader, and stuff that are um, horizontal or vertical. It depends on the horizontal or vertical position of the objects. It will blend these two shaders, and you have a thickness, which is basically opacity, and uh, a threshold, and a depth decay to control the softness and the distribution of the shaders. So I use this trick on almost all of the objects. So uh, if I take a look at the metal material, it's just basically the same thing. You get the standard redshift material with with the maps coming from Painter, and then you have the same dust material and another blender, and the same snow texture piped into it. And if you take a look at something like the chairs, for the chairs, because they were in so much depth of field, I didn't worry about texturing them in Painter or something like that. Um, I just used a standard texture of like a fabric red tile texture for the seat, and just like a generic wood tiled wood texture for the for the wood part. And then I have each of them going into a material blender, and I'm blending them with the same snow texture. So I'm using this snow texture for all of the shaders because there is no point, making like 10 different snow textures. It's just gonna slow the system down for no reason. So I'm just, dragging and dropping the same snow texture into the different blend materials to achieve, the result. The glass was interesting to create because uh, not that one, this one. The glass had it has a bumpy feel to it. So the way I achieve that one is I have a solid fractal going to the bump input, and then I have another image, which is a 2D image that is mapped into the reflection color and the reflection glossiness. And this is a black and white image, with the stains and scratches and dirt and that kind of stuff, which breaks up the perfect reflection and refraction of the glass and makes it look old and weathered and used, that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much all of the shaders, the blouse, maybe the last we can look at, but it's nothing fancy going on with that one. It's just tiled blue fabric, same bump piped into the bump map, point 0.2 reflection, very very dull reflection of point 0.4, and that's pretty much it. The render settings for this are also pretty simple. I have minimum samples of 4 and maximum samples of 512 with the adaptive threshold of 0.001. So that's controlling the quality of the image and the amount of noise you get in the render. One thing that's also important to mention is, excuse me, I use a bokeh texture, which is this one. So I use depth of field node with the bokeh texture. Um, just a simple a bokeh texture piped into it, and then because of this texture, the image gets darker. So I used a photographic exposure with the ISO cranked up a little bit. So the default is 100. So I cranked it up to 200, just to get back the light information that I lost. Um, and that's pretty much it. The GI is, brute force readings, point cloud, very low settings, 64. I find that very sufficient, and irradiance point cloud is just the default. I didn't touch any of that. And if I do render, IPR render, it looks like this. Hopefully Camtasia will not crash on me, so you can see the power of redshift and the speed you can get. So this is rendering real time. This is 1K render that I'm doing in the moment, and it's pretty incredible, what you can get out with redshift. And I do have a pretty beefy GPU. I have a Titan X and a GTX 980 cards, so two of them in the computer, and 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is really not a lot, and just a old 5 years old i7 processor. So as you can see, this is the render we're getting. And one thing that I should mention is I have a layer called spider webs, which if I turned on, IPR will update automatically, which is fantastic if you ask me. What I did is I get just a card, a plane geometry, and I mapped a spider web texture with an alpha channel, and that's how I got all of these spider webs going here. And I have like on the chair and here in the corners of the table, but you really can't see that because of the depth of field effect. So that's pretty much it about how things were, how things were rendered. And then uh, I'm not gonna go over the compositing because it was just a straight color correction. I didn't do any like render layers and composite them on top or anything like it. It's just color correcting at levels, hue saturation, that kind of stuff, and that pretty much gave me this result. So yeah, so that was a very very quick rundown of of the scene, how it was created, and the purpose behind the madness. So one thing about the workshop that I mentioned that I'm going to cover in the end is it's going to be a 2-day workshop here in Macedonia, where I'm going to just pick not sure yet. Either gonna pick a concept and try to make a 3D version of it, and get this kind of quality while people are watching. So it's gonna be a live live demo. It's gonna be very intensive, very packed. 16-hour long, 2 days. Like Saturday and Sunday, it's gonna be 8 hours one day, 8 hours the next, with with breaks, of course, for lunch. But yeah, I hope you guys are gonna like it, and you're gonna learn a lot. So I received few requests to do live stream version of the event as well. So if that's something people would like to see, let me know, so we can stream it or record it and make it available afterwards. And if you guys like this kind of breakdowns and making ofs, feel free to comment and email me. And yeah, I'm gonna do more in the future. So yeah, like and subscribe if you like it, and yeah, you're gonna see the final render in the description below. So I hope you like the podcast, and see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.